6 months prior, when Alexei Alexeyevich was finishing the repairs on some rooms at the new house, he visited the old mansion in search of a few things. He could still remember that moment. The sun was setting into the frosty air. Snow-flurries were already curling through the cooling fields. An ancient crow cawed and took off from a birch ornament with frost, knocking some of it over Alexei Alexeyevich as he followed a freshly cleared shoreline path in his fox-fur coat. At the river, squatting by an ice-hole, a peasant girl was filling a water-bucket. She lifted it on a carrying rocker and walked on, round-faced and dark-browed, glancing back at the master. Lights came on here and there in the village cabins, surrounded by snowdrifts. Creaking of gates and voices could be heard clearly in the cold air. It was a dull and peaceful scene. Alexei Alexeyevich came up onto the porch of the old house, where he already had the door broken open, and entered the rooms. All was covered with dust, frail and half-shattered. A peasant boy, who was his guide, swung his lantern to light the gilding on the walls here and the pieces of broken furniture there. Alexei Alexeyevich was just about ready to go back, but he peeked into a small empty room and saw a portrait of a young woman hanging crookedly on the wall there. The boy raised the lantern. The canvas was tinged with dust, but the colours were still fresh, and Alexei Alexeyevich distinguished a divinely beautiful face, smoothly coiffed powdered hair, high arches of eyebrows, a small passionate mouth with its corners slightly lifted, and a pale dress cut low across her virginal breasts. One of her hands rested calmly just below her chest, and held a rose between the thumb and the index finger. Alexei Alexeyevich realized that it was the portrait of the late Princess Praskovya Pavlovna Tolupova, his second cousin he only met when he was a child. The portrait was immediately taken to the new house and hung in the library. For many days Alexei Alexeyevich had the portrait before him. Whether he was reading a book, he was very fond of descriptions of exotic travels to wild countries, or making notes in his journal, or smoking a pipe, or simply pacing the gleaming parquet floor in his beaded slippers, Alexei Alexeyevich always gazed at length at the wondrous portrait. He gradually bestowed the image with all the splendid qualities of kindness, intelligence, and passion. In his mind he called Praskovya Pavlovna a friend of his loneliness and the muse of his dreams. He dreamed of her once, and saw her the same as in the portrait, motionless and haughty, except the rose in her hand was alive, and he kept reaching to take the flower from her hand, but couldn't. Alexei Alexeyevich woke up with his heart beating hard and his head hot. Since that night he could not look at the portrait without trepidation. The image of Praskovya Pavlovna had consumed his imagination.